Hi, Shell. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Great to be chatting to you on a Saturday. So good to be in jeans and a t-shirt.
Hey, and we picked white t-shirts today, unassumedly. We didn't even know.
Matchy matchy.
So thank you for having a conversation with me. We are talking about leadership today, but we're sort of off topic a little bit. The Dynamic Leader book season, which was season one of the podcast, is it's already come to an end. And so we're moving into our second season, and I think this is one of a really good way to kind of kick it off. Just about random topics that we kind of get stuck in as leaders. And so for all of those viewers or listeners who don't know, Narelle Burke is the head of talent and learning at Kantar Global.
And the leadership.
She's well versed in leadership. She is also, for those who may not know, my big sister. So she has been a leader for I'd almost say almost 5 decades, but I think you might hit me if I said that. Definitely 4 decades in that I turned 40 this year. So you've been a leader for a significant portion of your life, Rel.
Thanks, Shell. That's lovely to hear. Not all of it role model leadership behaviour, let's be clear.
It was, that's a really, really good thing not to ever do. Thanks for that.
Glad I could help.
So Narelle and I got to talking recently, and I think Narelle is one of the best procrastinators that I've met, and I do see a little bit of it running through our family, with our auntie also holding a fairly predominant procrastination banner. What are your thoughts on procrastination in leadership, Rel?
So I'm instantly going to disagree with that statement because it's me. So when we were having this conversation, procrastination is one of those things where you go, are you putting off what you can do today? Is it a bad habit? And I look at procrastination as those things that you know you should do, but you don't get around to it, or you delay it until it's just in time, and it can lead to some really unproductive habits. And I would argue, Shell, that when I look at it, I'm actually not a procrastinator. I would have a different terminology for it.
Oh, okay. So let's go back to high school.
That was slightly different. I've evolved since then.
So what you've done is you've refined the art of procrastination and learned is that what you're saying?
Not at all. So I think there is what I've learned over the last few years is if you record what you do every day. So every day I record every block of time that I spend religiously. So you can go back over the last 2 decades and I can tell you exactly what I was doing at particular times. And I think when you take the time to do that, it creates patterns that you may not have been aware of before. And so I find it really easy to start my day with a list of things that I need to do to make sure that I get those things that are important signed off. And I do it. It's done, it gets out of the way. But what I find is there's some work at times, which I call deep thinking work, or work that takes blocks of concentrated time or thinking to be able to help things to land. And the more senior I've gotten, the more you need that space and that permission to step back and to think. And I would actually say, Shell, that I'm less of a procrastinator and more of a percolator.
Well, first of all, I love the fact that it's not a keyword. What we're saying is you've evolved from procrastination to percolation.
So I would say that what it has shown is patterns in my behavior. So let me go back. So if I think about procrastination as things that you put off that you could have done today, and that's simple stuff. You should make your bed, you should do the dishes, you should do your washing, you should probably do stuff that's important at work. You should get that stuff done. And I find that stuff really easy. I get up in the morning, I whip through it, it's no issue, it's out of the way, you move on and you get it done. Percolation for me is when I'm doing something for the first time, when I'm having to go into a space and really think about it and bring different pieces of information together, when I'm trying to create something new or I'm trying to take things in a different place. And what I tend to find is I need space in my diary to do that. So I need space where I can just think, read, reflect, pull stuff together, frame it out, storyboard it, and perhaps even go for a run or bring in some other information. And what I tend to find is that percolation, which is the ability to filter things through, the ability to allow things to float around and then land. And what I also find is if I try and force that process too soon, the work doesn't come out as well as it should have been. So there's also an element of heat or tension, or being able to take the amount of time to allow ideas to come together, to form, to separate them out, to pull them back together, and then it will land. And that time frame is quite uncomfortable for some people. For me, that timing can land relatively tight to deadlines. But if I try and do it a month in advance, it doesn't work. There is a time pressure piece that comes into it when the best ideas land. And you talk to people and you reflect on it. And so I call that percolation. So what I would say is most definitely easy tasks get done. Don't tend to procrastinate on that. But what I do is take the time to be able to pull thinking pieces of work together. And that's what I call percolation. And I think there's a really important difference, because otherwise you get a bad rap from your baby sister that you're a procrastinator and you're actually quite creative and deep thinking.
As much as I'd like to argue with you on that, for the sake of arguing, because that's what I do, and I think that's what a lot of younger siblings around the world do. I agree completely. It's interesting. I recently attempted watching a Netflix series called Hannibal, and oh my goodness, that is one series that is a real eye-opener. And there was a scene in it where the woman from the X-Files was on there, and Marcel said to me, "That's that lady from the X-Files." And I said, "Yeah, what is her name?" And now I purposely didn't look it up. It would have taken 10 seconds to Google. I would have had the name immediately. But I do this thing where I go, what is her name? And I just plant the seed, and then I don't think about it, and then it will come up, maybe in an hour, maybe 3 hours, maybe 5, just the thought again. And it's like, what is her name? And I was really conscious of it this time. So within 2 hours, I got the G. I was like, okay, her name starts with G. Gina. And so I'm trying to think of like, what is it? And I was like, no, it's something that's like Julie or something like that. Anyway, I didn't fight it, because when I fight it, what happens is I lose it completely, or it gets distorted with something else. And so I didn't fight it. I just let it go. And then, the next day, something came up, and I was like, oh, it ends in N. Her name in and then I let it go. And so within 3 days, and it took 3 days for it to come, I was like, Gillian Anderson, that's who it is. That's her name. I hadn't thought about it. I mean, when did X-Files come out?
Long time ago.
A long time ago. And so what I love about that is it's there somewhere. And I'm curious about your thoughts. You mentioned as you progress through leadership, I wonder if it's as we progress through life, the more stuff we've got in there, the longer it takes to kind of filter through and gather and collect all these pieces of information from wherever it's stored in our brain.
Yeah, it could be, and you're definitely more of an expert in that space than me. I also think that the more you shift from management and task, I need to get stuff done and make it happen. And we've got this real short-term nature about business, which is task, get stuff done, Trello boards, agile, make stuff happen, move it through, get it happening, iterate. So there's this whole demand on time that happens. And I think one of the luxuries that we do not spend enough time in or give enough value to is that ability to step back, to bring different pieces of information together, to look at, whether there's synergies or whether you want to decompress and pull stuff apart and bring different pieces together. But I think that's one of the strengths that I bring to the roles, is this ability to bring quite separate, distinct information together to form different patterns and different ways of moving forward. So I'll give you an example. So at the moment, I've just picked up the inclusion and diversity portfolio. I'm passionate about it, but it's a new area. So I'm having to go deep to learn about it, to find out, pull it apart and understand more about it. But it connects through to different streams of work that I'm already working on. So there's these pieces. And I'm also working through with internal teams around what it looks like. And I've just finished module 3, which is great, really happy about it. And there was pieces of information that were landing as I was going through the work internally. And on the Friday, before I had to do a workshop on the Monday, pieces of information came together, which formed the thoughts, which firmed up the frame, which then became what I did Tuesday. And then I brought in some other information from some workshops. So there's this, if you give yourself space and time, and it's not doing nothing, it's bringing thoughts together and helping to frame them, you start to get a broader thinking, bigger perspective, diverse points of view, and you can start to pull it together in your own way. And I think as managers and as leaders, we need to take time to give ourselves permission to have that creative space or to do that deep thinking. And also when you look at your diary, so if I look at my diary, Microsoft Teams has just come up with a way of being able to schedule time to focus. Real time to focus, you need blocks of time, 2 to 3 hours to be able to get into flow, to really pull things apart and research it. So I think, I think age might be something to do with it, but I also think the more senior you get, the more deeper thinking you need to do, and you need to pull back, and you need to you need to be able to schedule time in your diary, which is an absolute rare commodity. So I think there's a few things in there. If you do, it comes together in such a beautiful way.
You've reminded me of a book that I read last year, and it's called Hyperfocus by Chris Bailey. It's a fabulous book, but he talks about 2 concepts, and it's interesting what you're saying about creating time. So getting into flow state, or getting into the zone, or the area where we focus on, requires a whole lot of energy and attention, and it allows us to do logical tasks and difficult tasks a lot quicker than what we would if we weren't in flow state, because we're able to get in and be uninterrupted. So I think you could probably do something in a third of the time when you're in flow state. Okay. What he talks about as well, though, is that you can't be in flow state all of the time, because it does take a whole lot of energy. Yeah. But he talks about this other concept called scattered focus. And scattered focus,
I love that.
Yeah. So he says there's hyper focus on one side, and we've got to make time for ourselves to be really focused and pay attention. But he said then there's this opportunity for us to move into scattered focus, which is where creativity comes in, which is where we allow our mind to wander. But it's different to daydreaming in its I guess conventional sense. It's mind wandering, but it's intentional mind wandering, and you're taking notice of it. So you're observing your own mind wandering, and you're capturing little bits of ideas, information. I don't know whether MS Teams has done this already, but flow state, or getting into high focus, usually works best in the morning, whereas scattered focus is better when your mind is a little bit tired, and so your logical mind switches off and your creative mind switches on, and so there's a combination that I see in being able to schedule time.
Agreed. And like, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. So and it depends on what state. So if I go back to percolating ideas, depends on what state I am in the process. So what I've also found over time is if I'm new to something, or I'm trying to figure something out, I'll go wide. And I might read something. So I'll be sitting on the couch with Mark watching TV, and something will come to me, and I'll just research it and Google it and go off on a little Google adventure and find out more about it. Then I'll put it away, and then I might come back, and then I might read something, or I might hear something, or I might talk to someone about something. And you got all these pieces, and that scattered focus that you talk about. Or you're in the shower and a word will come to you like, I need to write that down. That was really interesting. And so I think those pieces at the start for me, which is probably about 3 to 4 weeks out from something, you get this broadening. And then what I also find where the difference between percolating and procrastinating comes in is if you spend too much time in scattered focus and don't start to condense the ideas, start to bring them down into, themes or context or exploration pieces, you don't get there. And then when I come up towards the end of it and I'm storyboarding or I'm pulling the ideas together, I have to get uber focused, otherwise I get scattered again. So for me, what you're talking about is how it works, and mine tends to be more focused in the afternoons because that's how it works, and then sort of scattered in the mornings and evenings. But I think the difference between percolating and having that ability to create and to think is knowing when to come out of scattered focus and into hyper focus, because otherwise you end up analyzing too much, too many ideas, you don't distill it, you get confused, it becomes overwhelming. Does that make sense? Because I think you've just nailed it beautifully.
Well, Chris Bailey did, for sure. It's great. I will definitely take the application of it, though. Do you think that people can learn to do that? Like, I sort of see that as a bit of a self-reflective exercise on what was the outcome? What was the process? Did the process that I followed deliver me the outcome that I wanted? If not, well, what other process have I done where it has delivered me the outcome, and what did I do differently there, or what were the components of it? And the mind wandering, or the going around in circles, or the getting lost in whatever it is, the whole realm of the thing that you're doing is part of the process. Do you think you need to be aware of yourself to figure that out?
It's a really good question, because I've only become aware of this, relatively, I knew it happened, but I felt guilty for it happening because I could have delivered something in, an eighth of time, but it wouldn't have been as good. And so I think, so I can only talk about my experience. So my experience has been, I think labels can be really, really challenging. So if you had have asked me a year ago, I would have said, I can get stuff done 2 timelines, and I push the limit on that, but I make stuff happen. And I'm driven, so I deliver. But the process getting there, if you asked me to reflect on it, would have been interesting and messy and confusing. Now that I can put some language around it, which is, since I can remember growing up, this is how I've worked. Like, you've known me a long time, Shell, and delivering assignments on the day it's due after pulling in all night is my idea of creativity under stress and pressure, and I do my best work then. So I think whether it's a learned behavior or it's something that you can do, I think one of the best things I ever did was writing down what I actually do and recording and tracking what I do, because what it gave me an idea of is how I was working, and being conscious of finding out what worked for me, how I actually got work done, and then breaking it down into stuff where I needed to do deeper thinking. So my advice to people would be, read about it, but then figure out what you're actually doing so you can decide, is it working for me, or is there stuff that I can do differently to reflect on it? My observation would be that if you need a process and you're driven by process and that works for you, find a process and tweak it and have it work for you. If you're more like me, which is freedom, flexibility, fun, don't confine me, then figure out how you can build time into doing something that probably comes naturally when you're running or in the shower or distracted. So I think, know what you're doing, figure out what works for you, find time, balance getting stuff done and being focused with time to think and reflect and be creative.
I love that. I think it's a really good metaphor from, particularly those who love coffee. If you don't like coffee, then consider it, you could steep instead of percolate. I mean, that would be
not quite as catchy, but sure.
Marinate or infuse or something. No, I love the concept of it. I was talking with a actually my writing partner, so in the process of writing a third book with another author at the moment, and we were talking about the process of getting each topic done, and the frustration that kind of occurs with I wrote this article, I started it at the beginning of the week, and then I just sat for 3 days, and I went in and I did another sentence, and then I went out, and so for me it is, I've got to get my original thoughts out on paper, because if I don't, my mind is not open to all the other stuff. So where you're talking about that divergent thinking, which is interesting because it's part of, the whole human-centered design principles. But part of the divergent thinking is that I get rid of, I get out of my head what's in there as it comes up. Otherwise, I tend to just marinate on those ideas.
Yep.
As opposed to allowing other stuff to come in. So, but that's my process, and I know my process. So it's like, well, I'm not actually going to progress with this. It's not going to get any better until I download and get everything out onto paper, and then I go away and I allow the other stuff to come in. And what I end up with is generally nothing like I started with.
It changes as you're thinking, and I think that's the other thing that I found. So years ago, I would put off tasks that I could get done, which crowds the mind, crowds the space, takes up mental space, which doesn't give you time to go into, for me, doesn't give me time to go into more of that creative space. So the other thing that I've learned is the stuff you have to get done that is simple tasks, get it out, get it done. And I sort of use, do, defer, delete, delegate. You just get it out of the way and make it happen. And the more you do that, the more space you create to go into other places as well. So I think it's just finding out, how do you get more deep thinking, more space to, and give yourself permission to explore and to have some fun and to bring different concepts together, because that's what we're paid to do as leaders. It's about strategy and development and creativity and innovation. Give yourself permission to percolate.
Hashtag permission. That's fabulous. There are some fabulous insights there, and so I think what I'm hearing is, advice for leaders is start to take notice of what you're doing. What programs do you use, or what's the system for capturing what you're doing with your time? I mean, I know calendar is forward thinking, but what are you doing to capture what you've done with your time?
Yeah, so I block everything. So the system that I use, every morning, I get up and do a review of my day. I put down any tasks that have to get done, my big 3 things, so that I'm focused on that. It goes into a written calendar, and I also log it into my calendar. So anyone over the last however long office has been around can see exactly how I've spent every day of my time over the last few years. And I think it's a way of reflecting and reviewing, but also forward planning as well. So yeah, I'm really strict around it, because as much as I hate process and planning, it gives me space to free up what I'm actually good at.
I'm so glad you raised that, because I hear a lot of people go, it's not my thing, I don't like to do that. And if you're a leader and you haven't found a way to organize yourself so that things kind of happen in a predictable, thought out routine, then actually you're spending a whole lot of time and energy just doing the basics. Whereas what you're saying, I know my basics, they're in there. I get up, I do them every morning. It's the beginning of my day, which allows me to then have that creativity, that spontaneity, that unplanned kind of space to play. So I think that's also really, really important. It's something I've been talking to leaders about, particularly those who go, yeah, but it's okay for you, Shelley, because you're really organized. I'm like, yeah, but being really organized and assuming that I like being organized is often incorrect. I love spontaneity, and I think that comes from our upbringing, where our dad would walk into the house and say, right, you've got half an hour to pack your bag, get in the car, we're going. And you'd go from 5 minutes home hanging out to where we don't know when we're going to be back. And he did that our whole life. So I love the spontaneity, and I love being able to go on adventures and do that kind of thing. And the reason I can do that still with 3 kids, my own business, and all of that kind of thing, is exactly what you're talking about. Is because I plan it and I organize it, and I save time and energy on the basics.
And it raises a point in terms of with leaders, personal effectiveness isn't about what you like. It's not. Personal effectiveness is, as a leader, am I effectively managing where I spend my time and the impact that I create? Am I able to do the work that I need to do for myself, for my team, and the organization I work in? So personal effectiveness for me is not a choice. If you have not figured that out as a manager or as a leader, it is going to get you in trouble at some point in time, because your ability to get work done, whether basic tasks or deep thinking work, is what you're paid to do. And we all have the same amount of time. How you organize it, how you plan it, how you manage it determines how good you are as a leader.
I really can't add to that. It's perfect. What Narelle said, everyone.
Plus some really good behaviors and being ethical, but figure out how you work. It's a fundamental. If you don't get that right, everything else is really, really hard.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. It's been a pleasure. If anyone's interested in hearing more from Narelle, connect with her on LinkedIn and watch her crazy antics in the workplace. They're not crazy, actually. They're very well polished. Clearly, she does her work.
And I'm going to say, so Shelley, now you say I percolate. I don't procrastinate. Hashtag older sister.
And I promise never to call you a procrastinator again. That's my oath, my pledge to you as your sister. Procrastination is off the table and percolation is on. So permission for all you younger siblings to do the same with your older brother or sister. But thanks again, Narelle, appreciate it. And everyone else, we will be back in whenever we're back, really, when we plan it. So we'll chat with you then. Thanks.
So.